Okay, here we're going to demonstrate a modified auto groover, and what we've done is it works like a regular groover, do all kinds of size lenses, but the limitations to the typical auto groover before the automated edgers came out with the grooving mode built in them was that these went down to maybe 24 millimeters before the chuck pieces ran into these metal holders down here that guide the lens through, and it would ride right on there, and that would limit the size of lens that you could groove because the lens won't reach the grooving wheel. So we'll go ahead and demo what a regular auto groover will do. This is your typical small 25 millimeter lens, and I like to start them so that they're in here vertically. I like to start right on the bottom edge here so that I can see where it's grooving in the center of the lens. You just do a little test and you just nick it, and you can see if you need to move it one way or the other, and that way you get a nice even groove around the front of the lens. So our switch is down here. This is going to rotate the lens, and this is going to turn on the groover. So what we do is on this tool right here, this manipulates the distance of the front of the lens, and that sets the thickness that the groove is going to be set in from the front surface of the lens. So the farther I rotate this out, the farther the groove moves this way, because the lens is going to ride against this front edge here. So this is a thin lens, so we're going to set it up so we're maybe a millimeter in from the front of the lens, but we'll go ahead and test it. Now this right here, this will control your groove depth. Okay, and the way you do that is you just rotate this wheel up and down, and up. The farther you go, the less depth you're going to groove into the lens. The farther down you go, the deeper you're going to groove into the lens. And so that controls that, and then you can go even farther with this adjustment screw. You can manipulate it even farther. This side is spring activated, so it's constantly putting pressure on the back of the lens, so that lens stays right up to the front of the this guidepost here, this roller, and that'll make sure the lens has a nice even groove around the front surface. Now on the bottom here, you see you have these settings. You have these two brass prongs in this spring, and you have three markings under here. You have R for rear, F for front, and C for center. If we're going to do a front surface groove, so the groove is going to be parallel around the front surface of the lens, we're going to set it up this way. If we're going to do a rear surface groove, we're going to set it up this way. If we're going to do these are typically for minus lenses. Now this one, for a plus lens, you'll want to do a center groove, and you're going to set it up this way. So now we're pulling in both these lens guides in equally, and to make sure they're symmetrical, you put in this center post right in the middle here. See, it's going to go, there's a little notch for both of these, and that makes these two symmetrical. And what you do to make sure both work evenly, you have to rotate this down the middle, so it's not bumping on one side of the guide or the other, and both these will now work symmetrically regardless of which part of the lens it's touching. And that way you'll get a nice center rotation around the front of the lens. So the thickest part of the lens, the groove will be centered, and the thinnest part of a plus lens, the groove will also be centered. But we're going to do minus lenses today. So pull that out and switch us over to front surface. The spring came off my holder here, so I'll stick that in the front surface. And we'll adjust the front lens guide about there. This one's automatically got spring pressure. We've got the lens mounted. So I'll turn on the edger and then I'll touch the lens to the grooving wheel, and when I do that I move this out of the way so that the lens rides excuse me, right on the wheel, and then as soon as I feel it drop down off the guide, I know I'm up against the guide and I'm just touching the cutting wheel, and that'll give me a good indication of where that notch is going to end up here. You know, it'll kind of show up as a white groove with the lens powder from cutting. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, so we've got a nice little white mark here. It's not quite in the center, it's a little more towards the back of the lens than I'd like. So I'm going to tighten this up some. I'm going to rotate this clockwise, and that's going to put cam pressure on the back of this arm, and that's going to bring the front of it in. So I'm going to do that again, check it. That's a lot better. That's sitting more on the in the center of the lens. Now when you get on these lenses, what you'll find on the thinner lenses is if you set it directly in the middle on the bottom or top of the lens on the B measurement, as you get around to these sharp corners, the groove tends to move a little bit towards the back, or towards the front, excuse me. And so what can happen is if you put it too far in the, too close to the middle, or to the right of middle, more towards the front of the lens, by the time you get around to these corners of these lenses, you can run that groove right to the edge, and you risk chipping the lens, or sometimes you run the groove right off the lens and you ruin it and you got to order a new lens. So I like to be to the center, if not a little bit to the left of center, towards the back of the lens, so you give room towards these corners here as you get out there. Now, of course, we're doing just a plano lens, which is one of the thinnest lenses. Obviously, you can put a groove in, so this is a bit of a challenge. Most of your lenses will be a little bit thicker, but if you can do this, you can do any lens. So let's go ahead and run this. What I'm going to do is start the motor first. You can go ahead and I open this up by pushing on the back of this cam, let it drop down, and just let it rest there, and then I let go of this so it's constantly got pressure. Now, it's not going to do any damage if you just let the lens sit there, because it's already grooved the material out. It's just going to spin inside the groove. It's not going to do any more cutting until I flip this switch, which is going to rotate the lens. What I usually do is do at least 2 or 3 full rotations to make sure all the material has been removed, so you got a nice symmetrical groove all the way around the lens and a nice even depth. Basically, when you stop hearing it cutting, it's done. Okay, so now for the edger modification that we made to cut smaller lenses. What you're going to do is just pry this chuck off. It's got a rubber O-ring in there, so it sticks in there pretty well. Then you're going to snap out the other side. Then you're going to slip in our chuck modification. Then you're going to slip in the other side. It's a cap that goes on there. These are rubber faced, so they won't damage your lens. Now, because we're gripping such a small footprint of the lens, you really can't put enough, you can't crank down enough surface pressure without possibly breaking the lens to grip that lens so that it rotates as it's cutting. So what I do to make sure we get a good edge around this, I'll just take a regular blocking pad, and we're going to cut a small chunk off here. cut another small chunk off the other side, just so we grip that lens, just like when we're edging a lens. Same idea. And just put that in the middle on this side. Put that in the middle on this side. Now we got a really good grip on that lens, and we don't have to crank down on it and possibly crack a very expensive lens. Okay, so pull that sticky stuff off, and we're going to go through the same process. We're going to center this up, down, left, and right. The same process of positioning our groove. Turn it on. We're going to nick the groove and look at the centering. It's a little bit too far to the back, so we're going to rotate this in and move it a little bit to the right. A bit more. That looks pretty good there. Let's go with that. Okay, so 2 full turns, that should do it. And what I'll do sometimes is I'll grab a little toothbrush, a dry toothbrush, and it gets the dust out of the lens, out of the groove, so you can see that you got a nice even groove all the way around this lens. I think next time what I do is move it just a little bit more toward the back, so when you get out here to the corner you don't have as much of a sharp edge, but this one would work definitely. So it gets better with practice. You get a feel for it, and pretty soon it's there's nothing to fear. You just literally get in the groove, so to speak. And you can groove these all day long without making any mistakes. So that's basically it. So to reverse the process, you're just going to move the cap off, take out the modification, put this center turn one in first, put the driving mechanism side on next, and now you're back to standard grooving procedure. And this has a big enough footprint, so when you clamp down on that lens, you don't have to worry about putting those sticky pads on. You can still, if you want to do that, if you're afraid of that. But just remember, if you do put the sticky pads on, that you get the dust off these little chucks, so that the sticky pad actually works. So there you go. Here's your edger auto groover modification to groove all the way down to a 18 or 20 millimeter lens. Caught in a landslide, no escape from reality.
up to the skies and see.